idea pops into your brain called a patent professor. That's my name. I'm a law school professor. An engineer too. I think math is fun and patents are cool.
Folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. Dirty Secrets. Yes, Dirty Secrets. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I know there are a lot of lawyers out there that are like starting to grasp the concept of marketing. I've got to separate myself. What should I do? How do I do it? And you hire marketing agencies and you're like, oh my God, am I getting ripped off? I don't even know what to do. I don't know how to hire them. So I brought on today's show John Rizvi, the law firm growth professor. Also, some people might know of him as the patent professor. IP attorney. This man, I'm going to just say, I know I got to cut to the chase, but I just want to let you know the man started his own intellectual property practice with just by himself, a cell phone, a laptop in a dungeon. Literally, the man was in a dungeon, and now he's got 60 employees generating eight figures. It wasn't a dungeon, it was a spare bedroom in the house. But, I can only imagine. Anyhow, how are you doing today, John?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Greg. It's a pleasure being here.
Yes. So I am one that has hired many marketers, not really knowing what I'm doing across the board, case acquisition, net newsletters, websites. And I'm just like, dear God, please, I hope this works. So I figured, why not bring you on and get the knowledge that I need and that a lot of my colleagues need and a lot of lawyers need. So let's start. You wrote two books. One of them called The Dirty Secrets Marketing Agencies Used to Rip Lawyers Off. So that'll be like the first half, like all the things not to do. And then the second half, it will deal with your other book, which is If You Brand It, They Will Come. And we'll talk about I guess, everybody has kind of come to grips with the fact that branding is super important and all that. Okay, you take the field here. Like, how did you go from IP attorney, which you still are, and dive headfirst into the digital marketing space? Something
Yeah,
bad must
so
have happened.
I mean, I was always I didn't initially start out as a patent attorney. I was an engineer. So in fact, a structural engineer. So numbers and spreadsheets and inventions and technical science and math, that was my thing. And I wanted to, I was fascinated by inventors, and that's why I decided to become a patent attorney. Uh, and I joined this huge law firm in New York City. It's Fish and Neve. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're basically to patents and inventions what Muhammad Ali is to boxing. These are the guys that patented Thomas Edison's light bulb, Henry Ford's automotive ideas. They patented the airplane and the telephone. So pretty much every major iconic invention. But when I started at this law firm, it was nothing like what I anticipated. I was working with, corporate lawyers and huge multinational corporations and MBAs, just shuffling paper around and never met with an inventor. So I spent 5 years of practice until I decided that I want to start my own law firm. And this was back when, before Zoom calls and video conference calls, and it was a different world back in 2001. The partners looked at me like I was crazy. They said, nobody leaves. This is possibly the most prestigious patent law firm in the world. They said people go in-house to cushy corporate positions, but not hang out a shingle. And in Florida, and to put this in perspective, I mean, this was after the 2000 election fiasco. So people in the rest of the country thought, first of all, nobody thought there were inventors in Florida, and we couldn't figure anything out. They said, how are you going to get a client? You need to, you can't just grow a practice based on intellectual property, patents and trademarks in Florida. You have to take other types of work. And the mentors I had, they suggested simple corporations and simple wills. And not wanting to do that, I knew I had to do something different to really brand as myself, so I stand out. And I don't know if you want to talk about branding first, or the digital marketing. It may be more natural to jump right into branding,
Okay.
and switch the order if that's fine. Because where the importance of the brand came through to me is more of necessity. Is I would go to networking meetings, try to drum up work for patent work. And my wife's a dentist, so she would accompany me to these meetings. We'd compare notes at the end of a conference or trade show or something, and she'd be like, "Oh my God," excited, like, "Oh my God, I have 15 potential new patients. This is great. I love this." And I would come back empty. And like, I met 100 people, handed out a ton of business cards, but nobody has a new idea that they want to protect. And I thought it was unfair because everyone has teeth. So she has like an entire market of potential people that could use her services. So I knew I had to do something different. And at that time, the Florida bar did not allow law firms to use trade names. So you couldn't have, I would have to practice as John Rizvi, PA, and I knew that wasn't going to work. That wasn't, it's just, I didn't have the marketing budget to get my name out there. So I used a slogan, the patent professor. And today, the marketing agencies, they have fancy terms for this. They would call it split testing. But my sign, my business cards, everything would say John Rizvi, PA, and then underneath, or maybe hyphen, the patent professor. And that was an informal split test because everybody that called the office, they weren't asking for John, they weren't, and even checks were being written out to the patent professor. And it's embarrassing. I had to go back to a couple clients and say, well, I can't deposit this. You need to rewrite this to John Rizvi, PA.
Were they
And that
like,
was
who was that?
yeah, yeah. They're like, who's that? And to me, like a light bulb went off, and I said, wow, you know what? Like that's the magic is not having is being so memorable that people gravitate towards the trade name or the patent professor instead of myself. A lot of lawyers are that and that was traditionally not even a choice. They had no option. The bars wouldn't permit that. Um, the ticket type defense law firms really started this trend with the ticket clinic, and there's a bunch of other law firms, and they initially had trouble as well. They always had to have the lawyer's name uh, in addition to the brand.
Yeah.
So that was my initial split testing, and it really is what brought me on this journey of really like going in, doubling down on the power of the brand and less on the name of the firm. And I find when you start marketing, especially if you start putting money into ads, a lot of that money is you can think of as rented real estate, right? Google will show your listing on pay per click. As long as you keep paying them month after month, your listing will be up. The moment you stop, you're gone. And if you have a law firm name that's complicated or that's hard to remember and that doesn't include the practice area, you have to work that much harder and longer to establish a reputation to where people can associate your name with the practice area. And then, and I'm talking like massive amounts of advertising before that works.
Some people are just not that creative or lucky in terms of coming up with a brand. Um, what suggestions would you make to somebody that's starting their own firm? In terms of like coming up with a brand. It's like, oh, well, I need to brand myself. What now what?
Yeah. So, and I've helped a lot of lawyers with branding, and it's actually creativity in the branding kind of cuts against most lawyers, and it's counterintuitive, but you would think somebody highly creative would be better at branding. But you cannot be so far ahead of your client base that it requires too much imagination for them to figure out your practice area. So sometimes as lawyers, and we love legal terminology. And you'll see with podcasts, you'll see a lot of podcasts from lawyers that will say things like they'll have the word bench or lawyer or jurist or even worse, use Latin terms that all lawyers know, recipes or whatever, and
Yeah.
that's the name of their podcast. But if their listeners are not lawyers, that's meaningless to their listeners, right? Like people, the normal person does not go around thinking about things like minimum contacts and personal jurisdiction, like and you'll see podcast names of that. I love yours, by the way, like cut to the chase. It's intuitive. And you didn't get overly creative. You didn't have that levels of oh, I get it. And sometimes lawyer podcasts and their branding is such that it's the aha moment comes too late, and you don't have that much time to get to become memorable and catch the attention of somebody, especially now that they're scrolling on social media. The name has to be intuitive. You have to immediately know what the take is, and preferably what your practice area is from your brand, so that you get associated with a certain practice area. That's what I was able to do with the patent professor. That's one tip. The other thing is not only keep it intuitive, but you cannot, it's really hard to brand more than one practice area. And this gets difficult if you have multiple practice areas. And I do, like yes, it's all lumped under intellectual property, but the patent professor is catchy and memorable. The patent and trademark and copyright professor
Yeah.
isn't. So I had a tough decision to make. I had to decide, okay, it needs to be one practice area. And of course, you can still practice in other areas, and we get plenty of trademark and copyright cases, but it's hard for the human mind to remember, any more than at most a couple practice areas if there's some way you can bring it in. But the mistake is when you try to be so broad that you're not missing any of your practice areas, then your brand gets diluted.
Yeah. So part of I've been around the block for a long time, and I actually spent in the podcast space. There's so many podcast consultants. It's like every day somebody's pitching me for digital
Yep.
marketing, somebody's pitching me podcast consultant, whatever. So I've spent so much time on the name of my show, and I've had some consultants say, no, that's not good. It has to like spell out exactly what your podcast is about. I'm like, my podcast is about everything. I don't know, so but part of the branding is also a logo, right? I mean, don't you want to have some besides a name? Is it a name, a logo, a name and logo, or
Yes.
I mean, could it be one or the other, or what do you say about that?
Yeah, so the name is a lot more critical than the logo, a lot more important because people, you still can't search based on a logo. So if your potential prospect remembers the logo, but they don't remember the words, what do they type into Google to find that logo, right? It's hard. So I always, if you're on the fence and you're trying to decide, do I do the name, do I do the logo? Absolutely, the name takes precedence. If you have a logo that's catchy and memorable, and it ties in with your practice area, then it helps. Then by all means, incorporate the logo. There's a law firm that represents legal marijuana manufacturers and retailers, and they've branded themselves as Cannabis Council, which makes sense. But and their logo is a marijuana either plant or leaf, but it ties in, and
Yeah.
their client base sees it and identifies with it. But if the logo doesn't, it kind of detracts from your brand if it has nothing to do with what your practice area. If it's a triangle with, like a fancy like circle in the middle or you know, like you have to look at it and say, okay, what does this represent? And some lawyers don't like that because it seems almost cliche. Like if you practice personal injury law, you may not be excited about a car crash as your logo.
Yeah.
Again, lawyers like to be creative. It's like, oh, that's not creative enough. That's so predictable. But if you get too creative, now you've got the problem of most of your client base might not be able to keep up with your intellect and figure out what your logo is supposed to represent. So you need to really keep it simple.
Yeah, I had one of my prior episodes. I had two attorneys from California that they were called the Pot Brothers,
Yep.
and they put together an Instagram post, which was essentially the 29 words you can say when you if you get pulled over by the cops. And that was it. And it went viral and they totally took off from that. So, I mean, do you subscribe to the concept of trying to do something viral that will, expand your audience base? Or do you think that's just not realistic?
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it's scary and it's risky for lawyers, right? We want to be seen and respected by our peers. For my law firm, and I'll let me maybe show it by a way of demonstration. I have a rap about patents, which is how I sometimes introduce myself at speaking positions. Yeah, you ready for this, Greg?
Absolutely.
So when a new idea pops into your brain, call the patent professor. That's my name. I'm a law school professor. An engineer too. I think math is fun and patents are cool. Patents are cool. We've hired former examiners. They'll work for you. We'll get your patent and we'll push it through. We have patent illustrators extraordinaire, experts that can pull drawings out of thin air. We have mechanical engineers, electrical too, designers and prototype guys for you. If the patent office says your idea's not new, that's just red tape that will cut right through.
So when a new idea pops in your brain, call the patent professor. That's my name.
That's amazing. And that is a first on the podcast to the chase. We always like to set new, first or whatever. So thank you for that.
So, but your question was a great one. It's like, well, and like in terms of going viral, it's like when you do something out of the ordinary, yes, it's memorable. Yes, it helps with your client base. But I did when we purchased our building for the law firm, we had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and I performed this at the ceremony. And I had a couple months after that, one of our top associates. He was an IBM, former patent attorney for IBM, really corporate professional. He resigned because he thought that the image of the law firm was not something he wanted to associate with. He's being made fun of by other corporate patent lawyers because you went from IBM to the patent professor. And when things like that happen as a lawyer, you have to take pause. You're like, wait a minute, am I is it worth it? Am I going too far? I've lost a big significant client over the years. One client specifically wrote, and I remember his email word for word, and it was, "We are a serious company, and we have serious ideas, and we need a serious patent law firm." Now, my firm's like we've had clients of ours that have gotten patents that have sold for $100 million. So we're serious when it comes to results. But when that happened, I was like, wait, am I really going in the right direction? Or do I need to step back and become more corporate? And I decided to double down. And that's really been the secret to our growth because that makes us different, that makes us memorable. When I spoke about our building, when we were decorating the inside, I had an interior decorator that I fired because they were just focusing on traditional law firm colors like mahogany, cherry wood, and marble floors. And our walls are red, like in our office. My favorite color is red. My shirt's red. Our conference room chairs are red and black. So when a prospective inventor comes to our office, it's unlike any law office they've ever been to. And they know they're in some place different. They're not going to forget the patent professor. And I talk about this. I have the pictures on our website. And when I speak, I talk about these things. They're, I think, phenomenal, but they're also, it's like there's nothing great is going to happen without some risk. So there is some risk of that. But inventors are creative individuals that think outside the box. And my practice area, it works, but you have to be, you still have to be cognizant of your client base. Now, if I practice, trusts and estate law, and we had serious, people coming in their 60s and 70s, and they might not like these colors. They're too,
Yeah.
they want stability and strength and conservative law firms, and it might work. But the beauty of marketing is that in order to really attract your ideal client, you end up repelling some, and you have to be okay with that. You're not going to be, you know, chosen by everyone. And if you try that, you'll find a much smaller prospective client base would be interested in hiring you.
Yeah. So, speaking about red and branding and all that and its impact, I'm a golfer, and all golfers know Tiger Woods puts on that red shirt on Sunday, and cha-ching! Not only did he bring in enormous amounts of money through winning, but he also brought in an enormous amounts of money being the tiger with the red color and the blood in the water and all that. So, little things like that can go a long way. So I want to wrap up this first part. By the way, John does have his own, on top of being a patent attorney running a law firm. He also does the Patent Professor podcast, so you can get a lot of his tips more in depthly. Go to that show as well. And he does digital marketing for law firms. So I don't want you to think, oh, just because he's a patent attorney, he doesn't do that. But little disclaimer or whatever, not disclaimer, but explanation or clarification. So, I did listen to some of your podcasts, and there were two things that I thought I definitely buy into a lot. Two concepts, which is one is authenticity and speaking who you are and being who you are, which you just kind of went over. And the other one is, of course, it's slipping my brain right now, is that you storytelling, and that it's okay to tell a story about a failure that you had and how you overcame. So let's talk about how important those two concepts are to the whole, what to do. And then we'll get to the how to deal with all those marketing agencies that are really ripping you off.
Yeah, so in terms of like authenticity, there's a lot of power to being vulnerable and sharing something that you genuinely have experienced, and it takes a lot of courage as well. So one of the things that I think has been in terms of storytelling that I talk about, and I had gave a TED talk where I actually described this when I had applied when I wanted to become a patent attorney. I didn't just want to work at any patent firm. I wanted to work at this law firm, Fish and Neve, and the placement director at the University of Miami said, "John, you've got zero chance at starting at this law firm. Like they're the most prestigious firm in the world. They hire from Harvard and Yale and traditional students that had done summer internships with them." And I was non-traditional in the sense that I put myself through law school at night by working full time during the day as an engineer, as a structural engineer. So I ignored that placement director and sent in my resume anyway. You probably think this is going to end up well since I'm telling this on your podcast. It didn't. I got this rejection letter. That was like a kick in the gut, and I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, and the next day at work, this is going to tell kind of date how old I am. I'm 54 years old. So the next day at work, I went to find a payphone to call this law firm and plead my case. And I remember standing there with a quarter in my hand, just trying to muster up the courage. And finally, I let it ring, and Miss Rogan picked up. She's the director of placement at the firm, and I said, Miss Rogan, I'm John Rizvi. I got your letter, and I want to remind you that your law firm is the law firm that represented the Wright brothers, and these are two bicycle mechanics that neither one of them went to college. They're from Dayton, Ohio. They didn't have investors. Only one finished high school, in fact. Uh, and she rightly said, Mr. Risby, I don't really understand what your point is. And I remember this like it was yesterday. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I said, my point is that your hiring committee, just like they people misjudge the Wright brothers and their ability to invent the airplane, your hiring committee has misjudged me, and I need them to look at my application again. And I was nervous, so I hung up. And I didn't really expect anything to come of it. I just needed to get that off my chest, and I felt better until 5 days later, I got a letter in the mail. This tells you this is not, you didn't get rejection by email back then. It was a letter, and my hands were trembling because I was a law student at the time applying. I thought maybe I was being sued for something. I had no idea what this was. And it was this law firm inviting me to come on board and join them as an attorney.
Oh, wow.
And I tell this story to, in terms of vulnerability, for years, I didn't tell anybody because you hear about imposter syndrome, right? So I always felt like, you know what, all the other lawyers here, they were chosen and they are like have big fancy degrees from fancy law firms and the firm wanted them. And I'm here because I kind of kicked my way through the door and pled my case. And nobody at the firm knew that I had a rejection letter and 5 days later an acceptance letter. Now what I do, it took years, but now I have both those letters framed up in my office and I talk about them, and it's been liberating because now when I have a client that's an inventor and they come in, instead of hiding behind that facade of professionalism, I point to those letters and say, hey, listen, if you have a new idea, you need to fight for it. It's been given to you for a reason, and it's not going to be a walk in the park. Like if you really believe in what you want to do, do it. I've walked that walk myself, and clients appreciate that. There's a lot of lawyers are, I've been on law review and I'm this and I'm that and I'm smart and I'm brilliant, and that's great, but there's no vulnerability there. But the vulnerability is like, hey, listen, I might have a big law firm now, I might be successful now, and have a reputation, but I didn't always, and this is the journey that I went through, and that's perhaps what you talk about with storytelling. That's when the brand becomes powerful. Logos are great, colors are great, websites and the whole bit, but ultimately what is juicy is human connection and story and people feeling like they know who you are. And if you never reveal anything beyond your credentials, then what do you have? You don't stand apart. Nobody can relate to you or see you as being any different than any other attorney out there.
Nice. All right. So now I want to shift over. Listen, there's a lot more that John, you got to listen to his podcast. He talks about websites, simplifying that, the algorithm and all that. You got to, we don't have the time to go through all the best practices or whatever. Now I want to shift over because I know a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my buddies or whatever, we've hired we don't know, how do you hire a marketer? It's not like buying a car and I'm like going to Edmunds and like reviewing them. It's just not that same way. And I got to tell you, 2 minutes before we started our podcast, the last email I got was a pitch from another marketer. I'm getting like 20 of them a week. I don't know one from the other, and I'm not going to sit there, doing some due diligence to figure out who's the best. So talk to me about, your book on the dirty secrets.
Yeah, so here,
Everybody loves dirty
yep.
secrets.
Here it is. Dirty secrets digital marketing agencies use to rip lawyers off. And I can, being a lawyer, having practiced for 25 years, I've seen all the tricks. I don't think there's a new one out there yet. Oh, I take that back. AI is the latest trick now, and that's the new shiny object that they think a lot of lawyers think is going to be the game changer for them in terms of marketing, and the marketing agencies are now using that. But I've, partly with trial and error of experimenting with all of these digital marketing agencies, uh, the biggest thing perhaps that gave me a competitive advantage is my structural engineering, the technical background, because a lot of times marketing folks, they think it's all about creativity, and they're like, look at our, we're creative, we come up with exciting new stuff and beautiful video, and the engineer in me is fanatical about numbers and tracking. And when I would push these agencies for attribution, so okay, I've paid you $5,000, what have you gotten me in return? If it's a 5,000 monthly, and if it's SEO, They'll tell you that, well, you're not going to see anything for months and months and months and months. And and I just think I'm not okay spending money for months and months and months and months with no indication of progress. Others will tell you about, and there's this well-known like marketing genius like Dan Kennedy is a direct response genius that I follow. One of his quotes that I love is if you want to be paid in likes and shares and comments and view time, that's great. Then show me likes and shares and comments and view time on my videos. But if it's dollars you want to be paid in, then you have to translate likes and shares and views and page rank and all of this marketing gobbledygook, translate it into dollars. And if you're not able to translate it into dollars, I'm not going to pay you in dollars. And that's kind of the premise of my agency. And we have like detailed spreadsheets, and we're fanatical about attribution because if you spend money on a certain platform on ads, well, what is this ad getting back? And it can't just be, we're helping with your branding because, 100 more people today have seen that's true. That's great. That's an indication. But ultimately, those have to result in sales and dollars, or I can't continue spending. And that's, it's the lawyers somehow, I think in most areas, they're very readily able to step in and figure things out. But somehow, when it comes to marketing, they delegate their power to an agency and throw their hands up and say, I don't know your field. You take the wheel. But they don't have to know their field. But what you really have to know is the economics of your practice, and your ad spend, and hold the agency accountable. Like here's my ad spend. I'll continue, but at some point you have to tell me what the return is, and you have to translate it from marketing metrics into dollars if you want me to continue long term. The problem is a lot of agencies are okay if you don't continue long term because they build in churn as part of their business model, and they know so we'll take in 10 lawyers, seven uh, will stay at the end of year one, and three will leave, and that's not a problem because we'll get three more to join. And there's an endless supply because there's more and more lawyers, realizing that there's no substitute for digital marketing. So there's no shortage of new lawyers that are entering the field and wanting to learn how to grow their firms. That's been the biggest one of the dirty secrets is that is not to tie performance to money, to keep performance tied to page rank and likes and shares and comments and all of great things, but ultimately they're a means to an end, and the end goal is to close clients and get additional revenue.
All right, so you are doing digital marketing and you touched on AI being the shiny new toy. And, I keep reading that, okay, is AI going to replace SEO? Maybe I don't need a marketer, I'll just use AI. All right, tell me where you see digital marketing going in the next 2 years.
Yeah, so so AI is going to have to be a tool, and the tool is only as good as the person controlling it. And I think a mistake that's made is completely delegating a responsibility to AI. And you can think of AI perhaps as, a photographer would think of as a camera. Yes, cameras are remarkable and they can do a lot of things, but the camera cannot point and shoot in the direction that it wants to, and it can't figure out lighting, it can't figure out the time of day. All of these decisions need to be made by a human, and that's where AI falls short. So if you think of AI as perhaps the best analogy for a lawyer, think of AI as an associate and as a brand new associate. So brand new associates should be good at legal research, finding case law, but they're not going to be the best at judgment calls and experience and and they're not a substitute for that. So use AI to get you data, but then supplement and get some real human thinking to take that data and make decisions based on it. I think that's the biggest mistake. We've seen lawyers get sanctioned for using AI in briefs, and the AI would sometimes hallucinate and create fake cases. But those are things that lawyers would never take a chance on with an associate. You get a brand new first year associate, you have them do the legal research, and a lawyer would not rely on that. They shouldn't. They should review it, check the sites until they have the confidence that the person has. But with AI, somehow, because it's computer generated, they have the confidence from the get-go, and they just take what AI gives them and submit it and hope for the best.
Nice. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Cut to the Chase. I know John Rizvi has another call coming up soon, so I want to give him a chance to go and have a smoke, get some coffee or whatever. You've probably seen him on Forbes, CBS, The American Lawyer, done TEDx talks. He was just in Broward County, the Bar Association there explaining what he can do and all that. I'm going to drop a lot of, listen, this is the patent professor. This is the law growth firm professor. He's got a podcast. And by the way, if you have an invention that you want to talk to, the best and the best, here you go. So we're going to drop all the information in the show notes. John, thank you for coming on today. And
Thanks, Greg.
we'll take it from there. Maybe you'll have me on your podcast and I could tell you all my horror stories.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Little secrets. Okay. All right, folks, you know what to do. Share, subscribe. Why do you want to share this? You want to share this because other people need to hear about this. You want to smash that like button, help me out, make me feel better. I need likes. All right, John, thanks for that wrap also. That was amazing.
Of course. Thanks, Greg. I'll keep my day job for now, though.
All right.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.